Hello, this is Domenico with Easynomics, and this is part 2 of a minimum wage paper 3 calculation. There'll be a link below towards the for the first part of this video. So let's go straight to the question. In the first part of the video, again linked below, we went over the first 3 parts of this question. So in figure 1, we have the demand for labor, and demand is emanating from firms because this is a labor market where labor is an input. And so the roles here are reversed. Demand is from firms and households supply the resource, in this case, labor. On the y-axis, we're not measuring prices, we're measuring the wage or the value of that resource, labor. And it is in dollars per hour, $2, $4, $6, and so forth. So it's going up by units of $2 on the y-axis. On the x-axis, we're measuring the quantity of labor in millions of workers. And we see we're not starting at 0. It's skipped ahead. Here we're at 27 million, moving onwards to 28 million. And so in the first part of the question, we looked at the free market equilibrium, which was at $4 an hour, with the quantity supply and demanded at 27.7 million workers. And then we imposed the current minimum wage at the federal level in the United States, which is $7.25. We imposed that price floor. And we saw that the quantity supply increasing to 27.8 million, while the quantity demand by firms decreases to 27.6. So the distance here is a level of unemployment, in theory, that's created as a result of minimum wage. More quantity of supply, but reduced quantity of demand, leading to, in this case, 0.2 million or 200,000 workers that are looking for work, willing to work, but unable to find an employer willing to hire them. So let's go on to question D. And we're going to answer questions D, E, F, and G in this video. So question D says, draw and label a curve illustrating U.S. minimum wage at $10. So pause the video and consider where you would draw that $10 price floor. Pause the video now. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to tackle this first part of the question in this video. We're looking for $10. It's easy enough. We're going to go ahead and draw the price floor at $10, and there it is. So we followed that instruction. On a paper 3, you would do something like that. You would just go ahead and draw it. So draw and label a curve illustrating U.S. minimum wage, $10, done. Question E, calculate the quantity of unemployed low-wage workers generated from the $10 price floor. So what would that value be? So we're looking at the quantity of supply, and we notice that it hasn't changed. There's the quantity of supply. So for question D, quantity of supply equals 27.8 million workers. The quantity of demand, firms demanding workers, is unchanged from that $7.25 price floor to $10. It's still the same at 27.6 million. So calculate that quantity. We're going to show our work. So it's going to be the difference between the quantity supplied minus the quantity of demand will give us the quantity of excess supply or unemployed. Quantity of excess supply of labor. So we're going to show our work. We have 27.8 million minus 27.6 million. And that equals 0.2 million workers that are willing to offer their labor but cannot find an employer willing to hire them, so, which is also the same as 200,000. So there is our answer. So in the previous video, we highlighted, all right, this supply curve illustrating the quantity of supply from 27.6 to 27.8. All of these people willing to offer the labor, but they can't find an employer willing to hire them at that higher wage. So we have that excess supply. Great. So we've answered questions D and E. Now let's move on to the next question. Question F. Oops, this is question E. I should change that. Question E. Now we're going to move on to question F over here. Draw and label a curve that illustrates U.S. minimum wage at $15 on figure 1. So go ahead and pause the video and consider where you would draw that $15 price floor. Pause the video now. Okay, so we worked out that between 14 and 16, so it's going up by 2, but here we see on our IB grid paper lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to take 2 divided by 5, which equals 0.4. So we're going up by 0.4. So $14, 14.4, 14.8, and that's 15.2. So 15 is right around here. So I'll just mark that. We're going to go ahead and draw that price floor. So here's $15 an hour, more or less. Right about here, right approximately. There we go. So we've drawn our $15 price floor, finished, accomplished. Now let's move on to question G. Calculate the quantity of unemployed low-wage workers generated due to the $15 price floor. So what's the excess supply of labor generated as a result of that price floor? So we're going to take a look. At the quantity supply is about here. So I'm going to draw a line to figure out what is going to be the quantity supply at that price floor, and the quantity demand has dramatically decreased to this point here, and the quantity demand is approximately at 27 million, more or less. All right, so now I got to figure out the difference between the two. So the quantity supply at that higher wage of $15 is very high. A lot of households motivated to work at $15 an hour. Before, they were not motivated to offer themselves and to look for work. Now at 15, they're motivated. So we're going to go up again. It's going up by 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. So we're at 28, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So this is 28.3 million. So the quantity supply is now at 28.3 million workers, but the quantity demand has decreased, and it's gone down to exactly 27 million. So the excess supply of labor, will be equal to the quantity of supply minus the quantity of demand, which is equal to 28.3 million minus 27 million. And that is 1.3. 1.3 million workers that are willing to work but unable to find a job. And that is our final answer. So in theory, the dramatic increase of raising minimum wage from 10 to potentially $15 an hour really increases the level of unemployment by 1.3 million. So what does that look like? I'm going to go ahead and highlight again what's happening. So we have this quantity of supply of labor, all of these households along the supply curve looking for work but are unable to find work. And so that whole area there is about 1.3 million. Again, just to emphasize, right, the distance between here and over here, you have 1.3 million. 1.3 million workers looking for work and unable to find work. So here we have the level of supply along this kinked demand curve, but the demand is only right here. firms are only demanding up to this point. So there's the level of demand at $15, and here's all of this excess supply. So it's only these households here, in theory, that are being employed. So here we have this quantity of supply up to 27 million workers offering their labor at $15 an hour. And here we have the level of demand for that. And if we want to, just to illustrate, I can show you the producer and consumer surplus. So the consumer surplus, that being the firms consuming labor, we can see that in theory, that consumer surplus is reduced to this area here. And for the households that are employed, we can see the level of producer surplus. All right, so for these workers that get employed, this 27 million workers that get employed at $15 an hour, they get a big boost in their producer surplus, the supply curve, the households producing and offering labor. Big jump in that producer surplus, reduced consumer surplus by firms consuming labor. Okay, great. Some background. I'm going to put some links below. Where's this all coming from? Well, there is a proposal. There were proposals back in 2019 by the United States Congress. It was the Raise the Wage Act of 2019, and it was trying to increase federal minimum wage in steps to ultimately reach $15 an hour by the year 2025. The bill passed the House, but was not passed by the Senate. What was the impact of this? Well, there was a study, a nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office study that highlighted these are the effects. So going from $7.25 to $10 an hour illustrated that it would improve, it would raise earnings for up to 3.4 million workers, I guess increasing their producer surplus, and it would have virtually no effect on employment, which is what I was trying to do here. So when we go from $7.25 to $10, it was illustrating that there's no impact on the employment or the unemployment rate, right? I guess in theory, due to the very inelasticity of the supply and demand curve, in theory, right? That's my idea behind what's going on here. Then it looked at what would happen if you raised it to $12, and ultimately what would happen if you raised it to $15 an hour. What's interesting is that when you raise it to $15 million, according to this study, it would benefit 27 million workers, which is what I illustrate here, 27 million workers offering their labor, big boost in their producer surplus. But it would generate about 1.3 million jobs being lost, or about 1.3 million jobs being destroyed, or a level of unemployment created by the price floor legislation of 1.3 million, and which is what we calculated here, that 1.3 million dollars here. All right, so a big jump from $7.25 to 15 is just too big in theory, and that might lead to the very elasticity, the greater elasticity of the demand and possibly supply curves at that $15 price floor. So from a rational point of view, it might seem like a good idea just to take it up to 10, not really impacting unemployment. But of course, there's going to be a lot of pushback against that, because that can still not be enough, depending on the state or city you're living in, to cover your basic necessities, on top of the current inflation being experienced with food inflation, housing inflation, and so on. So I'll have a link to this, and this is a link to the actual study by the Congressional Budget Office that looked at that. If you're curious, you can go ahead and look at this study, and that's it. So that was the point of this video, a little bit of practice 3 with a real-world example. If you have any questions, feel free to comment those questions below, and don't forget to subscribe and to like. Thanks so much.